Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India calls out Pakistan's double standards on terror at SCO meeting. Attack on Pakistan paramilitary base in Bannu, 6 security personnel dead. And deadly earthquake pushes Afghanistan deeper into humanitarian crisis. At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in China's Tianjin, India once again took center stage in the global fight against terrorism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi used his address to remind the world that terror is not confined to any one country, but is a shared challenge to humanity. And with Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in attendance, Modi's remarks carried an unmistakable message for Islamabad that its double standards and continued support for extremist groups can no longer be ignored.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the plenary session of the 25th SCO summit in Tianjin, China, under the chairmanship of President Xi Jinping. Speaking before world leaders including Pakistan's Shehbaz Sharif, Modi called for a united global response to terrorism. He underlined that security, peace and stability are essential for development, but remain under constant threat from terrorism, separatism and extremism. India, he stressed, has long warned the world about these dangers and continues to lead joint counter-terror initiatives within the SCO framework.
मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है, किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं। आतंकवाद सिर्फ किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं, बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता।
Citing the recent terror strikes in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam, Modi reminded leaders that India has borne the scars of cross-border terrorism for more than 4 decades. The Pahalgam terror attack that killed 26 people, including a Nepali national, was claimed by a proxy of the Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba. In response, India blamed Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism and suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, citing a breach of the treaty's goodwill clause. The Prime Minister made it very clear, this was not only an attack on India, but an open challenge to every nation that believes in humanity. On May 7, 2025, just 15 days after the terror strike in Pahalgam, the Indian Armed Forces executed a highly coordinated and surgical offensive, Operation Sindoor. Multiple terror launch pads, training camps and logistical hubs in Pakistan-occupied territory were destroyed. Targets included key facilities of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, responsible for carrying out some of the deadliest attacks on Indian soil over the last 2 decades.
पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। इस दुख की घड़ी में जो मित्र देश हमारे साथ खड़े रहे, मैं उनका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। यह हमला केवल भारत की अंतरात्मा पर भी आघात नहीं था, यह मानवता में विश्वास रखने वाले हर देश, हर व्यक्ति को खुली चुनौती थी। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है? एक्सेलेंसी, हमें स्पष्ट रूप से और एक स्वर में कहना होगा कि आतंकवाद पर कोई भी डबल स्टैंडर्ड स्वीकार्य नहीं होंगे।
India has consistently taken the lead against terrorism within the SCO.
अल-कायदा और इससे जुड़े
Under the regional anti-terrorist structure, New Delhi spearheaded a joint information campaign against Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, raised its voice against terror financing and pushed for stronger coordination to combat radicalization.
This is absolutely a successful diplomatic mission by the Indian Prime Minister, and I said it from day one, that this outcome will be in India's favor, and that is what I've been saying, that India concern of the cross-border terrorism and India being a victim of terrorism have been addressed, and the Prime Minister put his foot on the ground and convinced the Chinese who was hosting this summit of the organization, and also convinced many of the world leaders on a bilateral meeting that this is a very important, that Indian sentiments and the victim of this terrorist attack should be at least condoled by the rest of the world, and I think that was the message very clear.
Outlining India's vision for the organization, Modi emphasized three key pillars: security, connectivity and opportunity, presenting India as a responsible, constructive and forward-looking member of the grouping.
भारत का हमेशा से मत रहा है कि मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी से केवल व्यापार ही नहीं बल्कि विश्वास और विकास के द्वार भी खुलते हैं। इसी सोच के साथ हम चाबहार पोर्ट और इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरिडोर जैसे इनिशिएटिव पर काम कर रहे हैं।
Beyond terrorism, Modi also highlighted India's constructive vision for the SCO. Calling the organization a guiding light for multilateralism and an inclusive world order, he underlined the growing relevance of the bloc, which has expanded from 6 Eurasian members to 10 permanent states and 16 dialogue and observer partners. This year's summit, Modi stressed, demonstrated how SCO nations have come together to condemn terrorism and back collective security efforts. By putting forward the SCO pillars, security, connectivity and opportunity, Modi projected India not only as a frontline state against terror, but also a nation driving cooperation, connectivity and development across Eurasia and beyond.
In northwest Pakistan, yet another deadly reminder of Islamabad's security failures. Terrorists stormed a paramilitary base in Bannu, killing 6 security personnel and sparking a 12-hour gun battle. Over recent months, the country has suffered the loss of numerous lives as terror groups relentlessly target both police personnel and civilians. The assault not only shows the firepower of extremist groups, but also exposes Pakistan's inability to secure its own territory along the Afghan border.
The assault began on September 3 in Bannu, a town in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province near the Afghan border, when a suicide bomber rammed an explosive-laden vehicle into the boundary wall of a paramilitary base. The breach allowed other attackers to storm the compound, triggering a fierce clash that raged for nearly 12 hours. At least 6 security personnel were killed. 16 others were wounded and 3 civilians injured. Local police confirmed that all 6 terrorists involved in the assault were neutralized during the operation.
6-7 हमारे सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस के जवान जो हैं वो जख्मी हैं और FCN के हमारे कोई 6-7 जख्मी हैं और 4 हमारे पुलिस वाले जख्मी हैं.
Authorities later confirmed the attackers were equipped with sniper rifles, rocket launchers and advanced radios. Proof this was no random strike but a carefully planned assault.
काफ़ी सोफिस्टिकेटेड वेपन्स उनके पास स्नाइपर्स थे, रॉकेट लॉन्चर्स थे और VBID के साथ आए थे, तो बाकायदा प्लानिंग के साथ आए थे और जितनी प्लानिंग वो करके आए थे उसमें उनको नाकामी हुई है। जितना हमारा नुकसान इतना नहीं हुआ जितना उनका नुकसान हुआ है। 6 ये आए थे और 6 के 6 वो हलाक हो गए।
No group has claimed responsibility, but suspicion immediately fell on the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP. The group has been fighting to overthrow the Pakistani state since 2007. For years, Islamabad has accused Kabul of harboring these terrorists, a charge the Afghan Taliban denies. But experts say Pakistan's own policies of nurturing extremists have created the very threat it is now battling. Attacks like these are on the rise. Over the past year, violence along the Afghan frontier has surged. Analysts point to the political turmoil in Islamabad and a fractured security establishment that has left ordinary Pakistanis vulnerable. The state, meanwhile, appears to be losing control.
Late in 2020, when Taliban took over Kabul, everybody was thinking that what a great victory that this has been for Pakistan, that they have fooled the United States, all the while supporting the Taliban. And a lot of people thought that this was a masterstroke by Pakistan, that they now have a ally to their west, which is completely under their control. That was an overstatement even then, and it has turned out to be a complete lie now. What they have got on their western front is not an ally but an autonomous body, an autonomous movement on its own, which will do what it wants to do, and it will basically keep on pushing Pakhtun nationalism wherever it finds. So that's what has happened.
The fallout goes beyond Pakistan. The Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan in 2021 has emboldened the TTP. Since then, attacks on Pakistani forces have sharply increased. Ironically, Islamabad was one of the few capitals that only celebrated the Taliban's takeover. In 2021, Pakistan supported the Taliban's takeover of Kabul, urging the global community to work with them. But the Taliban have instead turned a blind eye to TTP operations. A United Nations report released in February 2024 made it very clear. The Taliban are sympathetic to TTP's aims, supplying weapons, equipment, and even fighters for cross-border attacks. The 2024 UN findings underline what many have long suspected. Taliban-ruled Afghanistan remains a safe haven for terrorists, including Al-Qaeda affiliates and Pakistani insurgents. Yet Pakistan cannot escape responsibility. For decades, it used militant groups as strategic assets. Now those very proxies are destabilizing its own security and threatening the wider region.
Afghanistan is once again in mourning. A powerful earthquake devastated large parts of Nangarhar and Kunar provinces, killing more than 1,400 people and leaving over 3,100 injured. What unfolded in a matter of minutes has exposed more than just the dangers of Afghanistan's geography. It has underscored the country's deep humanitarian crisis under Taliban rule, its fragile healthcare system, and the impact of global sanctions that have cut the nation off from meaningful international support. On August 31st, just before midnight, a 6.0 magnitude tremor struck near Jalalabad in eastern Nangarhar province. At a shallow depth of 8 kilometers, the earthquake sent violent shock waves through surrounding districts and into neighboring Kunar.
زه یم د غزی آباد اوسیدونکی بیګا د شپې 12 بجو نه دلته زلزله په موږ باندې شوې ده او د بیګا رئیس ته موږ لګی په نشو دغه د مړو پر ایستلو هم لګی او مطلب موږ په مشکل کې ساري لکه اوسه پورې زموږ مړي اوس هم د خاورو لاندې دي پوه شولې نو ډېر مشکلاتو سره زموږ مخه ده او حکومت نه موږ هم دا خاص غواړو چې زموږ سره زر ته زر زموږ دا مړي دي د موږ خاورو نه راوباسي دغه مشکل زموږ دی حل کړي.
In seconds, entire villages built of mud brick and timber collapsed, crushing families inside. Aftershocks, One as strong as 4.7 followed, spreading panic and triggering landslides that cut off remote mountain roads. More than 1,400 people have lost their lives so far, with officials warning the toll could rise further. Nearly 3,000 others were left injured when the powerful quake struck eastern Afghanistan.
نو 12 بجې وی بیګا چې زلزلہ شروع شو او ډیر سخت تجربه وکړه حتی چې زما خپل پرې پندای باندې یو ستنم راولیدل د کور خو زه الله رحم وکړ د کور نه ووتلو خو زمنګ د کور طبعا خپل 15 وريري او یو راره او یو بل د بل ورزوی نو و شهیدان زموږ د خپل شخصي کور وشل او یو بل ترور شهید شو او نور چې د زخمیانو او د مړو انتها بس ورکه ده بس هر کور کې دغه حال هر کور.
In village after village, survivors have been left to bury their families with their own hands. Some have lost entire generations in a single night. Hospitals closest to the epicenter, including Jalalabad's main facility, are overwhelmed and unable to cope with the scale of casualties.
دا وراره مې پکې بچی دی او یوه کټه ده او درې بچي دي دا شهیدان شوي دي یو ورندار مې اپله شهیده شو د سره د بچو یو وراره مې او یو وراره مې او دوه ورېرې مې نورې شهیدان شوي دي کور په همدې حالات دی مړی نه هغه ځای کې پروت دی ورېره مې نار ته پرته سره د بچو تا چې په خپله ورشه وبینې په خپله به یې وینې وروره نو دا حالاتو د الله امر نو ځکه چې راغی په موږ وشنو.
Afghanistan sits on one of the world's most active seismic zones, where the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates collide. Shallow earthquakes like this one retain their power as they reach the surface, causing maximum destruction. Weak construction, mud, timber, and unreinforced concrete has made Afghan homes especially vulnerable. Landslides triggered by the quake have flattened mountain villages, and rivers blocked by debris now pose risks of flooding. This is not new. Herat and Paktika province saw deadly quakes in 2022 and 2023 that killed more than 2,000 people combined. Afghanistan remains trapped in a cycle where nature's fury repeatedly collides with man-made fragility. The earthquake's aftermath has exposed the limits of the Taliban's ability to govern. Since their return to power in 2021, Afghanistan's economy has collapsed. More than 23 million Afghans now depend on humanitarian aid, with 80% of the country's budget once funded by international donors, nearly all of which has been suspended. Public healthcare is in ruins. Sanctions and frozen financial assets abroad mean the de facto government has little capacity to respond. Aid is trickling in, but nowhere near enough. Survivors describe rescuers digging with bare hands, while Taliban officials drop commandos by helicopters into mountain areas where even landing is impossible. The United Nations has called the disaster a humanitarian emergency.
Turning to Afghanistan, you will have also seen over the weekend we issued a statement which the Secretary General said he is deeply saddened by the devastating loss of life caused by the Sunday's earthquake in the eastern Nangarhar province in Afghanistan. He expressed his solidarity with the people of Afghanistan, extended his sincere condolences to the families and victims, and wished a speedy recovery to those injured. He also said the UN in Afghanistan will spare no efforts to assist people, but noted that current humanitarian funding is insufficient to address the needs. He called for additional resources to be urgently dispatched to respond to the tragedy and crisis at hand. On the ground, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that preliminary reports from the de facto authorities now indicate at least 1,400 people have been killed and more than 3,100 injured. Casualty figures are expected to rise further as search and rescue teams reach affected areas. We have dispatched at least 25 assessment teams to the region to assess the situation. We're already supporting the response by deploying critical items to areas that can be reached.
India has stepped in quickly, sending 1,000 family tents to Kabul and 15 tons of food to Kunar province, with more shipments planned. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar expressed condolences to his Afghan counterpart, promising New Delhi's continued support. But geopolitics casts a long shadow. While India and a handful of countries provide aid, most foreign donations remain suspended. Western sanctions designed to pressure the Taliban are instead starving ordinary Afghans of relief during disasters. This dilemma is once again being debated as the world sees thousands of civilians in urgent need.
نن شپه دا حادثه وشو 12 بجې او دا کور زما د ورور دی چې مردل خان نومیږي دې کې 2 بچیان شهیدان شو او خپل هم زخمی دی او ماشومان مطلب زنانه هم دلته زخمی شو او بس دا یو ناڅاپي حادثه و ټول ته ولسونو باندې دا وشو.
From Toronto, exiled activists have sounded the alarm over Pakistan's worsening human rights crisis. In Balochistan, Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, disappearances, abductions and state repression are now routine. They warn that Islamabad's latest anti-terror laws are being used to silence dissent and criminalize human rights defenders. The message to the international community was urgent. Act now, hold Pakistan accountable and ensure justice for the thousands whose loved ones have vanished.
Enforced disappearances have become one of Pakistan's most chilling human rights challenges. Political activists, journalists, students, and ordinary citizens are vanishing without a trace. Families continue to search through protests, long marches, and appeals to courts and international bodies, yet answers remains elusive. This climate of fear has transformed dissent into a crime where speaking out can cost you on your freedom or your life. Toronto's Canadian Baloch Congress marked the UN Day for Victims of Enforced Disappearances with a conference highlighting these abuses. Speakers spotlighted the plight of Balochistan, where activists including Dr. Mehrang Baloch and leaders of the Baloch Yakjehti Committee have been detained or gone missing. The warnings were clear. Enforced disappearances and crimes against humanity are rising, unchecked across Balochistan, Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
On the day of Enforced Disappearances International Day, I will demand State of Pakistan to release all who they have detained unlawfully. It's not fair. And as we said that Amnesty International and International Human Rights Commission and Human Rights Watch had also make this a law that it is unlawful to detain any human being, any person without any allegations and putting it at the location that nobody knows.
At the conference, speakers pointed to Pakistan's new counter-terrorism laws as a major aggravating factor. Critics say these laws are now being weaponized to target anyone opposing state policies, effectively turning human rights defenders into labeled terrorists.
The Baloch Yakjehti Committee, whose leader Dr. Mehrang Baloch has been put behind bars, and the situation over there is getting precarious because now there are anti-terrorist laws that has been passed. So anyone who is opposed to Islamabad, opposed against enforced disappearances or human rights violations, will be facing terror charges. So every political activist is now potentially, in the eyes of Pakistan, a terrorist. And they will be taken away, disappeared as anti-state activists or anti-state terrorists. And there will be no trials for that.
The crisis, activists stressed, is not limited to Balochistan. Pashtuns, Sindhis and other oppressed communities face similar threats. The call was for unity among these groups to amplify their voices against systemic repression.
We Pashtuns, Baloch and Sindhis and other oppressed nations living in their geography, we have been victims of our resources, and I think that it's high time for all those oppressed nations to have a common forum, a common platform, and to pressurize the authoritarian government of Pakistan.
The testimonies painted a stark picture. Families torn apart, students abducted from schools, fathers taken from homes, and daughters disappeared from streets. Activists urged the international community to act decisively and hold Islamabad accountable.
As in our back home, Balochistan, situation is entirely worse and earth-breaking. Pakistani army and Pakistan intelligence agencies are abducting the people, and every day on a routine basis. No one is safe in Balochistan. Baloch students are abducted from classrooms, and Baloch fathers are abducted from their homes, and daughters are abducted from the streets. So all situation is worse in Balochistan. We are here to raise our voice, to bring our situation in front of the world. We hope one day the world powers and the world democracies will understand what's going on with us in Balochistan.
For families in Balochistan, Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, years continue to pass without answers. Graves remain unmarked and justice is elusive. From Toronto, the call was unambiguous. Silence is complicity. Unless the international community intervenes, Pakistan's disappeared will remain unseen, unheard, and forgotten.
That's all we have for you on this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with deeper insights and sharp analysis on the stories shaping the region. Until then, do write to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team. Stay informed, stay safe.